So welcome to the second of our Teaching with Primary Sources Tennessee History Day webinar series. For those of you who are, again, just joining us, as you're coming in, both your audio and your video is muted. If you would turn your video on, if at all possible, we would love to see your faces. Also, go ahead and be locating the chat box. I'm going to pull up my opening screens here. My name is Kira Duke, and I'm with the Teaching with Primary Sources program. And today, of course, is the second in our series. This is a six-part series. We did our first session yesterday, had a great attendance. We're really excited to see so many people joining us. And of course, today will be Tennessee History Day's first session. But before we turn things over to them, I want to share with you guys a few things. First, again, a few things about kind of how we're handling best practices. We do ask everyone to keep their mics muted throughout the presentation. We are recording this to post to our TPS-MTSU YouTube channels for others to watch later on. And it helps us to keep the audio clear for that broadcast. Also, if you would rename yourselves, that's going to help Hannah as she's taking attendance today. And it also is going to help us as we're responding to folks in the chat box. That way we know who we're talking to. You can rename yourself if you find the participant list. You'll be able to find wherever your device is currently named, and you'll see that where it says rename, and you can rename yourself there. We do want this to be interactive. There are a couple primary ways that you can interact with us. We aren't going to be doing any polling today, so we won't be doing that, but we do have our chat feature, which again, go ahead and locate the chat box and open that up. We encourage you to ask questions, share your experiences. Again, throughout the session, we will be responding to those, again, as you're making statements. And asking questions, and then we may pull out a few of those and actually discuss those before the end of the presentation. And then we also, there are reaction buttons. So if you hear something that you want to react to, there's a hands clap, a thumbs up. Sometimes our presenters may also ask you to use those to get kind of a quick response on some questions. And of course, both of those should be located towards the bottom where your control bar is. All right. Also, again, if you would like to follow along, find the resources referenced from any of our sessions in this webinar series, you can find that on our Padlet, which just think of that as kind of a digital bulletin board where we're posting PowerPoints and, again, all types of different resources and videos from this session. There's a QR code here that you can access that. Or, of course, you can just use the link there. And, again, all those materials will be posted there on our Padlet page. As I mentioned, again, this is the second of 6 webinars that we're doing in this series. Today, we're going to be exploring virtual strategies for National History Day. But you'll see we have 4 others happening over the next 2 weeks on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And so we would encourage you and hope you guys can join us for those. So with that bit of housekeeping out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer. Oh, Jennifer, you're still muted.
I got to unmute myself. Sorry. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first Tennessee History Day Tennessee Historical Society session of our 6-week, 6-month I want to introduce Hannah. She has been my student since last December, I believe. And I want to mention that
Jennifer, your audio is breaking up a little bit.
Oh, do I need to speak slower?
Yeah,
can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up.
I don't know what to do. Oh no. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so sorry about that. I want to introduce Lisa Oakley. She is our East District Tennessee History Day Coordinator. She's with us today. And I want to mention that Rebecca Bird and Becky Werner are both with us today. They're going to be presenting the last session in this series, which is on incorporating History Day either as a in-classroom project or as an extracurricular project. So our first speaker today is going to be Dr. Scott Johnson. Dr. Johnson teaches at Spring Hill High School in Columbia. He's been doing National History Day for about 20 years. He's twice been named Tennessee History Day Teacher of the Year, and he has served as a Berrien Ambassador for National History Day, meaning that he has mentored other teachers through their first year of doing Tennessee History Day in the classroom. So Dr. Johnson is going to share with us some resources, and I specifically asked him to include some world history resources, which he's done. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott now.
Scott, I think you're still muted.
All right, there we go. Can everybody hear me now? All right, I'm about to share my screen. Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you, Jennifer, for that introduction. Like Jennifer said, I've been doing History Day for a long time. It's one of the best programs I've ever come across in terms of teaching kids research skills, kind of all of the skills that you have to have when you're doing National History Day. And when we had our COVID-19 first wave back around March, I found myself doing Zoom classes with students. And the question is, what can you do over the computer to kind of continue the classroom experience as closely as possible? And there are actually a lot of great resources out there. So I wanted to share some of those with you. So we'll start with a program that I actually was a part of. And this is both world history and American history, because it kind of takes a deep dive on World War II. This is the Understanding Sacrifice program. And this was a partnership with National History Day and the American Battle Monuments Commission and the National Cemetery Administration. So I'm going to jump over to that real quick here. And basically, you have the link, PowerPoint to Jennifer to distribute. So you'll have all the links. But what you have here is lessons that were created by a large cadre of teachers from all over the country that dive into many different aspects of World War II in many different theaters. So you have some from the European theater, and then of course from the Pacific theater. It was really a neat experience to be chosen for this. I did this back in 2016, 2017, got to go to see actual locations for the Pacific War in the Philippines and Hawaii. So if I were going to do a kind of an example here, I would just pick, for instance, this is the lesson that I put together. Essentially what you do is you can kind of click on a lesson and then go to the particular lesson plan, and actually you can download the entire activity by clicking the download button and get a PDF of the entire thing. And then you can also go through it on the website and get the various pieces there. If you're looking for something really interactive, I'm somebody who's done mock trial in the past, so I really enjoy that kind of whole interaction and kind of bringing that to the classroom. This is something that you can do over Zoom, and it's essentially a trial. Of course, it's a little more fun if you're in class and you can kind of set things up and whatnot. But there are handouts that you give to the various students who will be taking on various roles. It's a little on the involved side, so I won't get too far into it. But basically, when a student selects a role, they get a role sheet, and they get to kind of get that background into their head, and then so that was the star witness there, General Curtis LeMay. It's a case before the International Court of Justice, kind of a fictional case where Japan is suing the United States under the Hague rules of warfare, where we agree not to bomb civilian areas, and the United States is defending its bombing of the cities of Japan, the firebombing of the cities of Japan. And again, this is prior to the dropping of the atom bombs. And then, so you can see here, you have attorneys. Japan will get to cross-examine, and the United States will get to direct questions. So again, this is something that I did in my own classroom after creating this for this program, and the kids loved it. We had a great time doing it. So it takes a couple of days. It took us about, I would say, almost a week, and it's a lot of fun in terms of just doing something where they're not just sitting and passively listening, but they have roles to play. They're in the driver's seat for particular parts of it, and they get to kind of get into that back and forth that you get into in a trial, where one side's trying to present their case and the other side is objecting to their their questions to the witness, etc. So that's something that can be a lot of fun. And so let me jump back over here. So that is just one of many great lessons on World War II. So whether you're teaching U.S. history or world history, you can really do a deep dive on World War II, which actually we were in the midst of World War II when the pandemic happened. So that, that was like the perfect time to have that kind of activity available. Also, just because of the incredible rich variety of things that are available through the American Battle Monuments Commission, I wanted to also share something that they have done. This is our tax dollars at work here. The government has created these incredible interactives that take on various parts of World War II. And so I'll jump into one here. For instance, looks like I need to get Flash Player. I thought I already had it. Well, plugin is blocked. Okay. Well, suffice it to say that these are pretty amazing interactives where they have little video clips, and you can go to, for instance, in the Battle of the Atlantic, you can go to all of these little various battle sites within the Battle of the Atlantic, and sites where a U-boat got into a confrontation with a convoy of ships, etc. And it really is just incredible. So what you can do is you can say, okay, everybody, we're gonna, you would do the first part where it kind of shares the video, the little video clip, and then we're gonna break out, and you can either work in groups or individually, and I want you to investigate this particular battle or this particular part. And you have so many things in the interactive that everybody can have a role to play, and can go and investigate things and then come back and share it with the group, and really just have a great time interacting. So that is definitely something that I would recommend taking some time to kind of look through when you get a chance. Another great website for online learning with history is Retro Report. Retro Report basically has a series of lesson plans that have little videos that go with them. And you can see here, it's got various periods, and these periods are connected to various topics. So this is, for instance, here's having to do with AP US history. There's little lesson plans that go with each of those period standards that go with that. And of course, then they also connect that to the national standards. So this is a great way to talk about various topics in history. So here is, for instance, the birth of the anti-Masonic Party. And my internet's a little slow here. But you can see here they've got like a little video, and I'll play just like a minute or so of this.
Third-party movements in American history have been likened to wildfires on the prairie. They have intense heat, but they burn out very quickly. The anti-Mason Party was not on the political scene very long, but they did leave us with one innovation, and that is the presidential nominating convention.
There is no substitute for victory.
United States of America.
All right, so you can see that the video clips that they've put together are short, very effective, and then they lead into these lesson plans that, and you've got discussion questions, comprehension questions, etc. So you could say to students, okay, I would like you to type out your answers to the comprehension questions, and then that's your homework. And then we're going to start today by talking about these discussion questions, and you can get into the discussion questions. There's writing prompts included as well, and just an incredible resource for the history classroom. So something I highly recommend. And if you've got like a list of topics you want to cover, you can find retro reports on a lot of those. Although I will say it is more focused on US history than world. And another incredible website that I have found to be a great resource over the years is Spartacus Educational. You may have heard of this before because it's been around for so long, but this was actually put together by a British teacher named John Simpkin in the UK. And it's a website that just covers history, but it encompasses an enormous amount of history. And of course, they do get into, but you can see here, there's the main menus. They've got an incredible variety of history. So they've got both American history and world history. And one of the great things about this particular website and the way that John Simpkin has put things together is the amount of detail and the primary sources that he attaches to every story. So for instance, if we were in World War I and we were looking at, for instance, the air war, you can see that there's all kinds of topics. He's got articles on the various aces in the war, and you have your articles, and then underneath, this is just an incredible resource for students. He has already gone and done the legwork to find primary source excerpts that go with that particular person or that particular topic. And so it's just a treasure trove of primary sources. Some articles will have, you know, like 20 some odd primary sources. Let me see if I can get to something a little more well known. Jump into Second World War. But this is a great way to get students to, like, for instance, if you were going to look into a particular aspect of World War II or women's history, etc., you have an enormous number of particular topics or people that you can assign to students, and then they can not only learn about that particular person kind of in a secondary source format, but they can also then share some primary source excerpts and do some analysis based off of those excerpts. I have to say, I am just blown away by the sheer volume of research that has gone into this website. He has been working on this for decades, and just the incredible legwork that he's done in terms of bringing together large numbers of primary sources on almost every topic imaginable, that really help kind of give you a great like set of things to analyze. And you know, you can do close readings, and you don't have to wade through a websites and or archives and trying to, you know, find General Eisenhower's, you know, papers and then find the particular thing. He's already got stuff that is very pertinent to that person or to that topic, and then it's all right there. So very, very highly recommended in terms of the things you can do with this, both in the classroom and virtually as well. All right. Another website that has been around for a long time is the History Place. Some of you may be very familiar with this. It is, let's see here, yeah, there it is. It is something where they've gone through and they've got timelines, they've got kind of chronological histories, they've got various topics that they get into. For instance, you've got child labor in America, and you know, there's a lot of visuals that you can interact with, that you can say, okay, we're going to do a close primary source examination of a particular photo or series of photos. You could have students each lead their own, like you say, here's how we do a close reading of a source or a close examination of a visual source. And then you could have each student lead their own examination of those sources. And it's all organized, it's all right there. Just an incredible resource for anyone who's interested in using it. And of course, it's been around for a long time, and I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with it. Another interesting site that really helps with getting students to make connections and to do their own presenting, because again, we're all kind of in this new world with Zoom. We don't know what it's like for people who are, you know, trying to learn from us, you know, and Cleovis, as it is called, has a really effective way of putting together little presentations, kind of doing mind mapping, seeing connections, etc. And so you can basically kind of put all of it together into a little presentation. I'll play you just a little bit here so you can kind of see how it works.
CleoVis enables users to combine the best features of timelines, mind mapping, and network visualization tools to help users collaborate on projects, better understand and organize their research materials, and present their findings to external audiences. It also teaches students how to cite their sources and help them differentiate between causation and correlation. CleoVis enables users to visualize their research or study materials while also gaining a deeper understanding of the historical connections at play across different time periods or eras. It allows students to conduct their own primary or secondary source research and to cite it in the application. CleoVis stresses collaboration. Students can work together in groups and learn from each other, which fosters a sense of community in the classroom. CleoVis allows users to categorize events according to assignments or preference.
All right. And so that gives you just a kind of a general sense of how it can be used. There is a syllabus generator as well, where you can even kind of generate a class syllabus and build a lot of your class out of CleoVis, which makes it very easy. For instance, say we're in school for a little while, and then we suddenly have to leave school because of a spike in cases and everybody having to go virtual for a little while. It allows you to kind of seamlessly transition from one to the other because you've got everything based out of CleoVis, and students are also kind of contributing through that website, and it's all connected together. And again, the value of being able to see connections and being able to build your understanding off of these mind maps, the trying to get that cause and effect connection, not just saying here's what happened, but here's how it all relates together, is an incredibly effective tool. And I think that another very timely topic is, we're having a national conversation about some tough topics having to do with race. Every time, those topics come up in the news, I'm always thinking about a program like Facing History and Ourselves. How can we face those issues, get students to kind of see things from the point of view of another group that they may not be a part of, and getting to kind of see different perspectives. And there's kind of an online version of this called Unsilence. And Unsilence has some incredible stuff in terms of their civics education, in terms of inspiring healing, social change, etc. And you can do quite a bit with this website based just out of its interactives having to do with the kind of the questions that are still gripping us today, having to do with our history. And so I found all of these resources to be incredible. Looks like I have a little time, so I am going to
we do have a question here. Someone had asked if these were all free resources.
Yes, I believe they all are, and either they're free or the company is offering a free trial during the pandemic. And so that is the case for all of them. Let me roll through. So Understanding Sacrifice is free. The American Battle Monuments Interactives are free. Retro Report, I believe, is free. Spartacus is free. the history place is free. And actually, I think in the history place, I forgot to roll through some of the various lessons that you can get into, but they have like an entire section on world history. There's like, they have lessons already laid out that go through entire parts of history. And let me see here. Cleovis, I believe, is something where you subscribe and pay a monthly fee, but during the pandemic, they're offering an extended free trial, very similar to what Zoom has done to kind of make it easier for people during, you know, these difficult times to kind of to continue educating kids over the web. And then Unsilence is free. That's my list of interactives and various resources that you can use. I'm going to make sure that Jennifer has this, so anybody who's interested can contact her for this list. The links are already on there, and you can explore those opportunities. Something that I was hoping to be able to present on that I didn't get done in time. I'm still in the process of working on this because I'm finding website development to be a little more difficult than I thought it was, is I have a curriculum that I've put together over the course of the past 20 years where I have essentially written my own textbook. I've kind of put everything into my own words and brought in visuals that I feel really help map out history effectively. And it's all based in PowerPoint. But unlike your standard PowerPoint, you've got text. I actually did my doctoral research on this, where I was taking a presentation tool designed for the business world and using it to present history in an educational setting. And how do you modify PowerPoint to make it more effective? Because, you know, we've all heard the expression death by PowerPoint. One of the ways to effectively do that is to get rid of bullets. Bullets are a way to kind of promote memorization. And what we want students to do is we want them to interact with a text. We want to say, okay, here's a small quote unquote nutshell narrative. Read this nutshell narrative, and then draw out the main ideas in your own words. And then we're going to discuss, and then you can see whether the ideas that you've drawn out match up with some of the other insights that you're going to hear. And I run this kind of Harkness discussion format where students are all responsible for various topics. It keeps it very interactive. And there's some great visuals. So like, for instance, if we're talking about an election, I have the electoral map up. So we can, you know, I have like a slide on the campaign, and then I can actually roll through one of these for SDC American History 2. But you can put faces with names. It makes it so everything that I wanted to have students be able to see while we're talking about a topic is all right there. It's all right on a slide. So, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get this all up on the web in a kind of an interactive format where teachers can pick and choose what they want in their particular presentation. And I'm, you know, the technical side is a little on the difficult side. So I'm still working on this. I'm actually looking to get help and donations and et cetera to kind of speed the process along, bring in some people who are a little more tech savvy than I am. But when you're talking about like a war, and you're like, for instance, you're trying to do the Civil War, you have to have battle maps up. And the problem is, where do I find the maps? Oh, wait a minute. We want to talk about General Lee. This is what General Lee looks like. Wait, I've got it all right there. It's all right on the slide. There's a summary, there's pictures, there's the map visuals, etc. And it kind of makes it easy to roll through topics. So for instance, this is the last unit for SDC American History 2. And you've got kind of some world history happening. At the same time, the United States is responding, and you can see here, Hitler bans his grip across Europe. My little maps that I've created expand the size of the Nazi Empire. So you can actually, as we go through, see the Nazi Empire grow. We can get into the Holocaust, and then there's, so students get to kind of watch as these events unfold. They get to watch the unfolding of the Nazi expansion, etc. You can just jump over to like a very short little YouTube clip with some of these to give some visual perspective as well. And then if I were to scroll, this is all World War II right here, but I was going to show you kind of what the there was an election. I think I went too far, but it really helps kind of bring history to life in a very so I wish this was a resource that I could say it's up on the web, it's ready to go, but I am still in the process of getting this put together. So if you know anybody who is willing to help out in any way. So for instance, this is a campaign. So we're talking I have every presidential election, every state coming into the union, every constitutional amendment getting added to the Constitution, etc., things like that. But if you know of anybody who is interested in helping me realize this dream, I think this would be a great way to continue to help people as we navigate the uncertain waters of pandemics and whatnot, and having to switch back and forth between virtual teaching and teaching, in the classroom with the kids. So I think that pretty much covers everything that I had to talk about, and I really hope I haven't cut into anyone else's time too much. But thank you for listening to my presentation.
All right, Scott, and there were a couple of specific questions that were in the chat box. I don't know, you may just want to respond to those, as we turn things back over to Jennifer. And we can come back and circle back to those at the very end.
All right, sounds good. So do I need to stop sharing my screen then?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so now it is my turn to share my screen. And we will go here. So I have done this so that even if you're not doing History Day, these should be resources that you can use in your classroom. So I'm going to talk about some National History Day resources that would also be applicable for people not doing History Day. We're going to talk a little bit about setting expectations, delivering new content, some learning strategies, working with primary sources virtually, and creating an end of semester assessment. So National History Day has done, they just really took the ball and ran with it. Lynn O'Hara is our curriculum director for National History Day, and she's fabulous. If you've ever had a chance to interact with her, you will know that she was a classroom teacher. She has a very effective way of delivering information. And she started back in the end of March and put together 7 webinars on teaching history virtually. And here are the topics, some of which I'm going to cover because I watched them all and I stole the highlights from Lynn. But if you want a more in-depth guide, and it's not just related to History Day, because she brings in some National History Day partners. So there's people from the National Archives, there's people from the Library of Congress, there's people from the White House Historical Association, who are presenting resources that their institutions have that can help you. And she does also pay attention to world history, so you world history people are not left out. This is on YouTube, and this link is going to be in the Padlet. There's a playlist for all 7 of these webinars. Each one takes about an hour. So the first 20 minutes is 15 to 20 minutes is Lynn. Then the next 15 to 20 minutes is the partner. And then the last section of it is devoted to questions. And so they do actually, they have kind of a gatekeeper who picks the best questions to present to the speakers. Now, one thing that I'm also going to talk about is having all of your information in one location. So you can go to YouTube to watch the videos, but then you need to go to the National History Day page to find the slides and the links to the partner organizations. So I've also included this link for you as well. You can just watch the webinar, but if you want more information, it's available on the National History Day website. National History Day is developing a graduate level class called Teaching History Virtually. The deadline to register is August 5th. It runs from August 17th to November 16th. Now, this does cost money. You do get professional development credit or you get graduate credit for it. And it's going to have different section leaders. I think there's dozens and dozens of people already registered for this. It's going to be a much more in-depth dive into these topics. And here's a list of topics, you know, that were not included in the webinar series is free. This is something that you have to pay for, but you might want to watch the webinar series and maybe that's enough for you just to get you started. And this is going to be something I think that they continue to offer, because I'm sort of approaching this next semester as if we're all going to have to be online. We may not be online all the time, but you're going to have some sort of online component to your teaching. And even if things go back to normal and we're back in the traditional classroom, it's still something that can enhance your teaching. Some people do what's called flipped instruction, where their lectures and so on are recorded and are available online, and then they save the classroom time kind of as a lab session. And so here's the link for online education. This is not the only class that National History Day is offering. There are also other topics that you might want to take a look at. Okay, so let's talk about expectations for an online environment. So an online teaching environment is a different animal than your traditional classroom. And one thing that's important is having all of your information in a central location. And some of this is going to be dependent upon your district. If you have a district supported webpage of your own, and here we see Dr. Johnson's, this would be where you want to put everything pretty much as far in advance as you can. So this is where you would want your syllabus. One thing that I recommend is sort of having a weekly newsletter. I know that parents sometimes complain that they're bombarded with messages from teachers, but you do want to establish transparency from the very beginning so that parents and guardians know what's going on. They know where to go, they know where to check on grades, they know where to check on deadlines. And so, like National History Day had their webinars in one place and then they had the resources for the webinars in another place, that's not ideal. So you want a central place, hopefully one that is supported by your school district and not one that you have to create yourself out of thin air. You want to think about a hierarchy of organization. How are you going to put your materials online so that students know where to go once they get to your website or once they get to your particular page or once they get to, I don't know if Blackboard is interactive. I did used to teach virtually, and we had an online classroom where we had a forum where we did our chats, and then we had different sections where I put the materials for each class. And then we had a grade book where the students could check their grades and where I could enter their grades. So you want to think about, are you going to organize things by week? You know, here's everything you need for week one. Here's all the handouts. Here's all the PowerPoint slides. Here's all the links that you need. Or are you going to do it thematically? If you're an English language arts teacher, maybe, here's everything you need to know about creating a thesis. You might want to think about organizing in terms of type. Here's all the handouts in one section. Here's all the PowerPoints in one section. So I would say do what works best for you and your students, but make sure that they don't have to go through layers and layers and layers in order to get to what they need. I used to be a classroom teacher, and so I now deal with students, especially once they've qualified for National History Day. So if a student emails me, Ms. Core, when's the deadline? I respond, and those of you who have had students who do History Day know, even if the student has only emailed me, I respond and I include you and the parent in the email chain, because I just want to protect myself. I don't want anybody ever saying, well, Ms. Core said that he could have a week extension, when I never said any such thing. So you want to make sure that the parents and guardians know what's going on, but you don't want to bombard them with that information. So I think if I were doing this today, I might tell them, expect a brief weekly update from me, or expect something every other week from me, so that they can say, we as a class are this far into the semester, and we've written our thesis for our project, and we've written all of our topic sentences, and we're starting to work on the supporting sentences, and we're learning about bibliographies, just so they know where you are in the semester. I think that if you have not taught online before, if you don't have any training on it, you need to acknowledge the limitations. You are dependent upon your district and what your district can provide for you. You and your students are also dependent upon the access to technology. I would be cautious about requiring students to create an account to participate in anything. I would try to see if there's educational accounts or teacher accounts that you can then share with a class. And also anything that costs money, you would want to be cautious about as well. I know a lot of you use Noodle Tools, and I believe that in the past, Noodle Tools has said, well, we have an educational account for $60 or something like that, and teachers have paid for that out of their classroom money. You will notice that the technology and the support for the technology is still evolving. If you've been using Zoom, you've probably had to do about 5 updates in the past 2 weeks, because they're still adding functions and they're responding to the needs that people have. So as we have needs for more complex breakout rooms or something like that, Zoom is working on that. But you might be using WebEx for your school district. And so you want to probably try to make friends with whoever the tech support is in your district and see if they can guide you through some of the updates. All right, so delivering new content. First of all, you need to decide or recognize what kind of environment are you working in. Are you doing it live like we're doing now, or is it something that's going to be recorded that can be viewed later? Now, the best ideal option would be to offer a mix. Then you would also want to, for example, this live session that we're doing now, we are recording it so it will be available to people who weren't able to make it to this session. When it comes to live sessions, save those for working on concepts or for working with difficult material that the students are having trouble grasping. Make the live sessions more interactive and more focused on question and answer. So the students need to come to the live sessions prepared. They need to have read the material in order to be able to discuss it. I would make use of, within Zoom, you can have breakout rooms. So if you have a class of 30 kids, you can place them into small groups. So you could have 5 groups of 6 students each. So you could assign each group a different topic or a different aspect of the material for them to analyze and synthesize, and then have everybody come back into the same session and have each group present on what they learned reading that brief biography of Martin Luther King. When it comes to lecture, I know that best practices say no lecture, no lecture, no lecture. Sometimes you have to lecture. Sometimes that is the most effective way of conveying the information. So with lectures, I suggest recording them ahead of time so that you can edit if you have those skills. You can have that planned well in advance. And the suggested length for lectures is 5 to 8 minutes for students and 10 to 12 minutes for adults. So it's brief chunks of time when it comes to lectures. When it comes to learning strategies, this is an ideal opportunity to take an interdisciplinary approach. This is a really good time to make friends with your school librarian and bring that person into what you're doing in the classroom. If you're team teaching, if you've already been team teaching, I think this is ideal for continuing that. One suggestion that Lynn had was giving students a choice of materials. So that would involve you pulling different primary sources related to a specific topic. And one really good place to find this is, as we talked about yesterday, is the Library of Congress exhibits, because they already have, you know, they've got posters, they've got photographs, they've got documents, they've got music. And so again, you could do this sort of in a group or small group setting where, let's say you're talking about women's suffrage, you could give each group a different primary source to look at and then bring them back together so that they have to explain to one another what they've looked at. Obviously, we can't do quizzes and tests, so you're going to be looking at a more creative output for measuring student success. And that might include doing a slide presentation, doing a little mini documentary, building a little website, doing an oral history interview, or interviewing an expert on the topic. This is also an ideal time to bring in guest lecturers and experts. A lot of museums and historical societies and cultural institutions have really ramped up their online presence and online outreach. So for example, I know the East Tennessee Historical Society is planning on doing little guided tours through their exhibits, doing site visits to areas around East Tennessee, and so maybe going to a state park and socially distancing from the park ranger and letting the park ranger explain what's important about that particular site, so that the burden isn't always upon you to be doing the talking. So working with primary sources need secondary sources for context. You also want to focus on quality over quantity. So it's much better to read one very significant letter from George Washington than reading 15 boring letters from George Washington. You want to strive for a variety of primary sources, bringing in different ways of looking at a particular time period. So yesterday, Stacy showed us this World Digital Library, and the reason I'm mentioning it again today is because it does a good job of providing context before you get into the actual primary source. So you could, for example, challenge students with a scavenger hunt. In order to do this, you need to be already familiar with the collection. So I would not go to the Library of Congress and go to the front landing page and have them do a search, because if they type in Andrew Jackson, they're going to come back with 35,000 different resources on Andrew Jackson. One collection you might want to work with, which we talked about yesterday, is the Tennessee State Library and Archives has a really good map collection. And there's not so many maps that it's overwhelming. So if you were doing the Revolutionary period, or if you were doing Tennessee, really at any point in the past, you could take the students to that particular collection and say, okay, find me a map that shows troop movements during World War II, or find me a map where you actually see Oak Ridge as a city. See if you can find the first map that shows Oak Ridge. And I think something like that would be fun for them to do, and it also would teach them about how to search, how to go about finding primary sources. So when it comes to an end of the semester assessment, or really any assessment in general, so you need to think about equity, access, and how you're going to grade it. So do your students have access to the internet? Do they have the skills to use some of the software to create a particular project? One thing that we forget about is that you can use a phone. If you have students who are working on a group project, they can talk to one another on a phone. They don't have to, they can talk to you on a phone. They don't have to have Zoom. They don't have to do that. They can still participate just with a phone line, and most people do have access to a phone. You need to think about what you're assessing. Are you looking for skills? Are you looking for mastery of the content? Or are you looking to see that they understand concepts like cause and effect? So here is where you get to be creative. And obviously we think History Day projects are perfect to use as an end of semester assessment. You might also consider an oral exam. Back in the olden days, lots of exams were oral exams. Now you would want to do a lot of prep with the students so they didn't get anxious about that. If you're participating in History Day, you could do a mock History Day interview with the student as an end of semester assessment or as a 6 weeks assessment. You could have them do a storyboard for a documentary. You could have them interview somebody for an oral history and have them write the context, have them contextualize the oral history and tie it to the concepts that you're studying. I also mentioned, Scott had mentioned Clio, so I also wanted to talk about Clio a little bit. This would be really good for, whoops, come back. This would be really good for any kind of oral local history project that you're working on. It's also something that could be incorporated into other projects. So we had a young woman do a documentary on integration in Memphis for National History Day project last year. And one of the judges suggested that she include a map. Well, this is someplace where she could go and she could write descriptions and identify locations that were important in Memphis for the integration that she was talking about. There are also already walking tours or digital tours that have been preset. One of the ones I looked at was the Women's History of New York. You're definitely going to want to preview these before you share them with the students. You might notice one of the stops on this particular tour is the New York City Museum of Sex. So you might not want to include that. But this is something that you could use for women's suffrage. You could use to test their writing skills. So let's say you were doing the Revolutionary War and you had identified particular sites that you thought were important. Can the students write the description that would go with that particular walking tour? All right, so obviously we think a History Day project is a really good example of an end of semester assessment. The categories, for those of you who've not done it before, are documentary, exhibit, performance, website, and paper. The students can work individually or in groups of 2 to 5. Now, when it comes to grading, what I recommend is that you give daily participation or completion grades. Are the students on task? Are they keeping up? Have they found 3 secondary sources? I would save the quality for the final project. So I recommend chunking the grading. So you're doing it over an entire semester, and maybe 100 points add up to, have you found 3 books? Have you written your thesis? Have you written your supporting statements? Did you find a good primary source? Did you write 5 entries on your bibliography? And each one of those daily assignments is building to the final project, which you do judge or grade in a qualitative way. But the students should be safe from crashing and burning because they've already accumulated 100 points toward their end of the semester grade. So there's a safety net for them. If they're keeping up, they should be able to do well enough to get a decent grade on their final project. Okay, so that's the content that I have today. I want to remind you that we do want you to take the survey. This is how we are taking attendance. And I will send a follow-up with the link to the form. We will have all the materials that you need for today and the other sessions in our Padlet. And then we are posting the Teaching with Primary Sources is editing, chopping out all the extra stuff, and putting the recorded session on their YouTube page. We've also made the link available on the Tennessee History Day website, the registration page where you registered for these particular webinars. So you can see this is yesterday's webinar, and then I say it's concluded, and then here, right here is the link to yesterday's session. So coming up, Kira's already talked about this a little bit, but for us, our next session is going to be talking about new History Day rules and rubrics and the National History Day theme. And then our final session, Becky Werner and Rebecca Bird are going to talk about incorporating National History Day either as an extracurricular activity or as a classroom project. Okay, that's all I have.
Jennifer, do you care if I make an announcement?
Go ahead.
So if you are on this webinar and you have not signed up for registration for this webinar series, please go to the link that I have included in the chat box. So you'll see it from me to everyone, and go ahead and fill out your registration so that we can see what other webinars you would like to attend and get your information. Thank you.
Oh, and I did get a question about if I had sent out certificates yet. I have not, because we're doing these webinars from home, so I got to wait till I get back to the office to do that. And I will probably do those in batches toward the end of each week. And I will send out an email when I do saying, your certificates are coming to you, please be looking for them. Oh, I guess I can stop my share.
All right, so that brings us to the conclusion of today's session. So just a couple quick reminders to everyone. Again, Jennifer mentioned the upcoming sessions that we have. Again, if you've not already registered for those, we encourage you to do so. If you weren't able to join us for yesterday's session, that one is available on YouTube now. You can go back and watch that one. We'll try to have today's session up and posted hopefully this afternoon, but it may be tomorrow because our TPS team is doing another webinar here at 1 o'clock. We do want your feedback. So in order to track your attendance and to, for those of you who are attending all 6 to get the stipend, you do have to complete a survey at the end of each webinar. And someone will drop that link in the chat box for everyone. Do go ahead and complete that. Again, you do need to complete one at the conclusion of each of the webinars. So if you did it yesterday, you do have to do it again today. So with that, that brings us to our conclusion for today. We will be sticking around for those of you who might have questions. We're happy to address those, but we are going to go ahead and stop our recording now. And again, we thank you guys for joining us.